One moment you're the King of England, ruling with strength and swagger. The next you're flat on your back, crushed beneath your own horse in a jousting match gone terribly wrong. Knocked unconscious for 2 hours, you wake up to a festering leg wound that will never heal. Your days of effortless charm slipping through your fingers like sand. Henry VIII, one of history's most feared monarchs, met a grim and repugnant end. His body was deformed, racked with unbearable pain, and emitted an odour so revolting that even courtiers fainted in his presence. After his death, caustic fluids seeped from his coffin, lapped up by stray dogs, a grotesque conclusion to his once glorious reign. Born on June 28, 1491, Henry ascended the throne at just 17, revered as Europe's most handsome prince. He was tall, athletic, with golden red hair and an aura of majesty. The Venetian ambassador praised his extraordinary figure and angelic looks, claiming no Christian prince compared to his beauty. Poets and ambassadors alike swooned over his striking looks, calling him the most handsome prince at the time. But his downfall began with a jousting accident on January 1536 in Greenwich. At 44, Henry was thrown from his horse, which collapsed on top of him, leaving him unconscious for 2 hours. Though he survived, his right leg never fully healed. The wound turned into an ulcer that continuously oozed, releasing a stench so unbearable that people smelled him before he entered a room. It was a devastating blow to his vanity, and courtiers were forced to endure the foul odour in silence, knowing that any sign of disgust could ignite the king's infamous wrath. This accident also marked a shift in Henry's personality. Coinciding with this event, he ordered the execution of his second wife, Anne Boleyn, under dubious accusations of adultery and treason. Some historians suggest his head injury exacerbated his already volatile nature, heightening his paranoia and violent tendencies. With his movement restricted, Henry's weight spiraled out of control. His once trim waist of 89 centimeters swelled beyond 130 centimeters, and his body exceeded 180 kilograms, rendering him immobile. His sheer size required a specially designed pulley system to transport him between royal apartments, and palace doors had to be widened just to accommodate his frame. Henry's downfall was further worsened by his excessive diet. Palace kitchen records reveal that he consumed around 5,000 calories daily, indulging in rich red meats and extravagant pies while barely touching vegetables. His meals were accompanied by staggering amounts of wine and beer, creating the perfect storm for his deteriorating health. The ulcers on his legs worsened, his body weakened, and his suffering deepened. By the time of his death, Henry VIII was barely a shadow of the once gallant king he had been. His body deteriorated beyond recognition, his pain inescapable, and his odour so overwhelming that it became infamous. After his death, corrosive fluids leaked from his coffin, reportedly attracting stray dogs, adding a haunting final note to his already tragic decline. Henry VIII's final years were a parade of bad medical decisions, questionable marriages, and an ever-expanding waistline. His physicians, bless their misguided souls, treated him with methods that today would make any doctor faint in horror. Cauterization with hot iron, because setting wounds on fire is clearly a great idea. Mixtures of arsenic and mercury, the stuff we now classify as deadly poison, and constant bloodletting that left him weaker than a soggy biscuit. His leg ulcers became so grotesque that you could see his bones through the rotting flesh, making him the medieval version of a horror movie villain. The smell. Oh, that was its own historical event. It was so unbearable that people could sense him coming 3 rooms away, like the world's worst perfume advertisement. At 49, despite his alarming condition, Henry married Catherine Howard, a 19-year-old beauty. He called it a return to youth, but really, it was a tragic comedy. With his massive frame, reeking odour, and inability to move easily, the marriage resembled something out of an ill-advised reality show. Catherine, understandably repulsed, sought comfort with a young courtier. But when Henry found out, he did what he did best, ordered both of them executed, romance, Tudor style. His final wife, Catherine Parr, had the misfortune of playing nurse instead of spouse. By now, Henry was less of a king and more of a medieval hospital patient. She tended to him with surprising devotion, perhaps because she realized the key to survival in this marriage was simply making sure he didn't turn against her. Henry was basically a ticking time bomb of medical conditions: diabetes, severe gout, hypertension, heart failure, and possibly syphilis, though historians are still arguing about that one. His final days turned into a dramatic mix of rage, paranoia, and regret. One moment he'd be screaming profanities at everyone. The next, he'd sit motionless, lost in thought, probably remembering how much fun life was before he smelled like a decomposing animal. His paranoia hit an all-time high. He became obsessed with poisoning, implementing extreme food security measures. Servants had to taste everything before it touched his royal lips, and even the cutlery was inspected like it was about to be launched into space. Some believe this obsession was the result of mental instability or repeated strokes, but either way, the king became harder to please than a food critic at a questionable buffet. As the end neared, Henry was barely functioning. His gangrene-ridden legs made movement nearly impossible, and the smell. Let's just say courtiers practically bathed in perfume just to survive his presence. The winter of 1546 to 1547 sealed his fate. With infections raging through his body, fevers rising, and delirium taking hold, Henry often muttered the names of his deceased wives, Jane Seymour, Anne Boleyn, possibly haunted by ghosts who had some serious grievances with him. Despite the obvious signs that the king was dying, no one dared say it out loud. In England, predicting the king's death was treason, so courtiers kept up the act of, "Oh, he'll recover soon," even while his body literally started decomposing before he had officially died. Finally, on January 27, 1547, Henry summoned Archbishop Thomas Cranmer. Unable to speak, he squeezed his hand to signal his faith, his last conscious gesture. On January 28th, at 55 years of age, the once mighty king took his final breath. And that should have been the end, but no, Henry VIII wasn't done making history. Due to his enormous size, a custom-made coffin was required. The embalming process was medieval at best, with his body stuffed with herbs like a very unfortunate turkey. Then came the most infamous moment of his death. His coffin started leaking fluid while resting in Canabie's chapel. Chroniclers recorded stray dogs licking up the putrid mess, a spectacle so humiliating you can almost hear the Shakespearean tragedy playing in the background. Thus, Henry VIII, the man who defied the Pope, beheaded wives, and reshaped England's religion, ended not as a glorious monarch, but as a pile of rotting flesh, violated by street dogs. What a way to go. Nearly 3 weeks after his death, on February 16th, 1547, Henry VIII finally received his grand royal funeral, despite the overpowering stench that could probably clear an entire castle. His coffin, oozing unpleasant fluids, was carried with the dignity expected of a monarch who once ruled with absolute authority. He was laid to rest in St. George's Chapel at Windsor Castle. Beside sat Jane Seymour, the wife who had managed to do what none of the others could, give him a son, Edward VI. Unfortunately, the boy Henry had turned the kingdom upside down, ruled for only 6 years, before dying at VIII, 15, proving once again that VIII Tudor family planning was never particularly successful. With Edward gone, the throne passed to Mary I, daughter of Catherine of Aragon, who did her best to undo Henry's Protestant reforms while earning the charming nickname Bloody Mary. Eventually, the crown landed on Elizabeth I, daughter of Anne Boleyn, whom Henry had beheaded on possibly made-up charges, which must have made for awkward family portraits. Henry VIII's disgusting, painful demise serves as a stark reminder that even the most powerful monarchs cannot escape biology. The man who reshaped England, defied the Pope, and eliminated wives with alarming efficiency ended up a victim of his own failing body. His death wasn't just the passing of a ruler, it marked the downfall of an era. As historian Alison Weir aptly put it, it is one of the great paradoxes of history that a man who began with so much promise, beauty, and ability ended as a grotesque caricature of himself, tormented by physical pain and mental instability, feared and flattered by those around him, but rarely truly loved. Henry had gone from Renaissance dreamboat to medieval nightmare, a walking cautionary tale about why eating entire feasts daily might not be the best life plan. His political legacy, the Anglican Church, and England's break from Rome still shapes the modern world, but his personal downfall is the real showstopper. In his final days, the once mighty king was a rotting, wheezing mess, barely able to move, surrounded by courtiers pretending everything was fine, while secretly stuffing perfume-soaked cloths up their sleeves to survive the smell. Perhaps the ultimate irony of Henry's life is that the king who sacrificed so much for a male heir ended up leaving his true legacy to his daughters, especially Elizabeth I, who would go on to rule far longer and far better than he ever did. Henry changed laws when they no longer suited him, but he couldn't rewrite the laws of nature. No matter how powerful you are, aging and bad choices will always catch up with you. The leaking coffin incident, where his embalming process failed spectacularly and stray dogs lapped up the putrid remains, was truly the final blow. Henry VIII had once been England's golden prince, feared and revered, yet his final moments were straight out of a dark comedy. And so England's most notorious king who beheaded wives, split the church, and ruled with an iron first ended as a rotting pile of flesh, proving once and for all that power is fleeting, but bad hygiene is forever.